Good evening. State Representative Bill Aman. Go over briefly what the state legislature did this past year. I have the 2011 major acts. Many of you who have written to me in the past, I have your email addresses and you have received a copy of this by email. Anyone who would like a copy, if they contact me at home, at the office, or even here at Town Hall, I can get you either a hard copy or the link that will get it to you online. But this particular publication is put together by the Nonpartisan Office of Legislative Research. And what this office does at the end of the session is to go through the 300 to 400 bills that we passed and pick the ones that they feel that the public will be most interested in or will have the greatest impact on the public, and they put them in a summary document. They also produce more detailed summary documents on a variety of topics, anywhere from like municipal government. Your council would be much more interested in all of the bills that impact municipal government. Someone in real estate was interested in the real estate, insurance is interested in insurance. Those who are in banking will get look at one in banking, human services, etc. So there's a variety of other reports that are available, but this is the overall general, most general one that we have. The one thing I would caution people when reading through this is it was published before the unions turned down the concession agreement. So much of the things in the budget that they talk about may or may not be occurring because, again, it was written a couple of weeks ago prior to it. The tax part of the budget, I think, is pretty much fixed. I do not see any changes on the tax side for the next year, probably 2 years. So whether you like the taxes that were passed or not, these are the ones that we're going to live with. That also includes the incentives such as that the movie studio was looking for and those other tax credits. Those have all been put into place and are pretty much doing it. One thing that the budget is doing this year is there's a constitutional spending cap that when the income tax was put in place, the voters also said you have to control spending, and there's a limit of spending. Out of an $18 billion budget, we are only $1 million below the cap currently for this coming year, and $278 million next year. That is virtually dead on. It's much closer than I would like to be, because it means that if there's any expenses that we did not anticipate as part of the budget, we either have to violate the spending cap or cut some other spending some other where. So it's going to, in that regard, it's going to be a very difficult time. I know also that as councilors, you're probably very concerned about municipal aid. As of now, I would say whatever you received and were promised for this year, you will receive. I may come back in September and tell you something different, but as of now, I think it's safe to say whatever Matt put in your budget and gave you his final numbers are the numbers that you are going to receive in it. There was many proposals to cut municipal aid, but they did not occur. Some of the bills that are of interest probably to the council and to the citizens, there's again, we're working on the brownfields development. My committees that I'm on work with this. It seems like every year we have to change the brownfields laws somehow to get those brownfields built on. And those are the areas usually in the cities, or even we have a couple here in town, that have been polluted and no one wants to touch them because of the liability and the cost of cleaning up. So rather than infill building, you move out to literally greener pastures somewhere else. And everybody agrees that that's not good for society, but so we take our brownfields legislation very seriously. Paid sick leave received a lot of discussion. It does cover everyone who has 50 or more employees. It does have a few exemptions, but pretty much if you have 50 employees or more and you're not granting sick leave, you most likely are going to have to do it in some form or the other. There's a variety of new child abuse and neglect statutes that I don't think most people are going to run into. But again, it's a social problem, and each year it seems like we have to tweak the statutes again to try to protect those who are falsely accused and punish those who are abusing children, and it's not an easy thing to do. DNA testing of criminals received a tremendous amount of publicity and talk, and where we ended up with it is if you're arrested for any 39 very serious felonies, this isn't just getting a traffic stop, you've got to do something pretty serious to be charged with a felony. Before you are released, you have to provide a sample of DNA to go against the data banks. At one point, we were looking at a very large charge for this, cost to the state, and it's my understanding that the cost is going to be very low because of some federal money that's coming forward to encourage that. The DNA testing not only solves many crimes that are decades or years old, but they also have found that many people are found not guilty or innocent or released on the DNA profile almost immediately. So it really has gotten a lot of support from a variety of groups, including groups that originally protested very hard against DNA testing. One of the things that will affect the town of South Windsor, even though I think we do it most of the time, the chief asked me to vote against it, was the videotaping of confessions, etc., within, again, a Class A or B felony. And again, these are the most serious crimes, and that the interrogation has to be videotaped or a recording made of it so that there's no question about coercion or anything else that was said and done during it. School bullying, if anybody has followed the newspapers, it is something that has come up on a regular basis. The new law expands what bullying is, requires school systems to address the problem. There's a very long bill regarding elections, and I'm very glad to say that talking to both our registrars, or in fact all four of the registrars stopped down and saw me and talked to me about the bill. As far as I can tell, we do pretty much everything that is in this very long bill ahead of time. We have already done it. There were a few things that are being transferred from the town clerk to the registrars and vice versa. But again, most of those things, it appears for us, are going to either be minor changes or things that we already do. So in that regard, I was pretty happy with the election reform bill and how it affected the town of South Windsor. Also getting a lot of publicity this year was in-state tuition at our colleges for illegal or undocumented immigrants or aliens. It does require for you to get in-state tuition at least 4 years, have spent 4 years of high school here, and graduated from a high school in Connecticut. There is some questions whether by doing that we have to open up in-state tuition for a wider body of people. The argument is, why should someone from Springfield have to pay in-state or not pay in-state tuition if an illegal immigrant already does? So that will be and is being discussed within the federal courts. The municipal liability for recreational land use was expanded. I think it's not as far as I would have liked it to go, but it was as far as the Trial Lawyers Association would allow it to go, in that many towns, and I don't believe South Windsor had fallen into this, but we could easily have done it, had pulled some of their recreational space off the public use because of fear of liability. And this ran everything from parks like we have, like the Donnelly, to some sheer walls for cliff climbing that municipalities said we couldn't accept the liability under the way the court had ruled. So this addresses that. I am sure that we're going to hear more about it at some point in the future. Taxes obviously have gone up on a variety of things, and the paper has covered, I think, almost all of them. There are some technical problems. In fact, I've had from two of the counselors contact me, one on sales tax and one on the estate tax, trying to figure out how to actually apply it. I've also received from several constituents who want to obey the law but are trying to figure out what it says. And so those things, hopefully, the Department of Revenue Service will be able to get back to individuals and explain exactly what they need to do. On cell phones, you no longer can text while driving, and if you're driving a commercial vehicle, you still can't text in one. That was one of the things, I guess it was in the law, that we prohibited texting and cell phone calls on personal vehicles, but if you're driving a school bus, you could. That was corrected. It also substantially increased the fines. There's a change in the way the state of Connecticut is going to deal with drunken drivers, with the DWIs. The current system, really, until you're in your third offense, you're not going to get punished with jail time, but then you could get substantial time. The problem that they found is that doesn't cure the problem of drunken driving. What the current thinking is, and what is done, is that your license suspension will be for much less of a period of time. Jail time will be reduced significantly, but you will be required to have an ignition interlock device on your car that if you have been drinking even a moderate amount, your car will not start. And then the punishments for driving or defeating the interlock device or driving someone else's car without one get to be pretty serious in it. So again, it's a social problem that we have. Will this cure it? I don't know, but I think all of us are trying to find a way of keeping our roads a little bit safer and keeping the DWIs off. The current system, I think right now, too many attorneys are representing clients and making things very difficult for the system to actually work. If you can't afford a good attorney, you're in very much a different position. And this, I think, hopefully clears it up quite a bit. For myself, I was very happy this year that I was finally able to get my municipal roads bill through. I wasn't able to get it in through as a standalone legislation, but was able to get it included in the transportation bill. What this basically says that if you're working on Sullivan Avenue currently, and someone speeds by or dangerous driving past you, the fines are doubled. If you're on Buckland Road, because it's a state highway, Buckland Road is this South Windsor Road, do the same action, and the fines were not doubled. Mike Gannick and his staff asked me several years ago to address it. I had bills in several years in a row doing it. The problem I kept running into was everybody thought it was a good idea, but then they would tag their own amendments onto it and it would get lost at the last of the session. So this year, instead of doing, I also did that, but I also went through the chairmen of the committees and got it included in the very large bill that we had. I also spent, even though I'm not on the Public Safety or Education Committee, on carbon monoxide testers for schools. I don't know if you followed the papers, but there were several schools this year that children and staff actually were impacted by carbon monoxide. And so their original idea was to put a carbon monoxide detector literally in every floor of every school. And when someone asked me to review the legislation, I thought of Eli Terry, which is an all-electric school, and unless Ed can figure out how you can get carbon monoxide in there, I can't. The only place it might come is if they do gas cooking. in the cafeteria, but the bill would have required all of the schools to be renovated with hardwired carbon monoxide detectors in every room, etc. Very, very expensive. Worked with them to have the legislation written in a way that I think for most school systems they'll be able to protect their students, protect their staff, and not spend an awful lot of money. So again, I do have the reports readily available. If anybody would like one, please contact me. I'll have it sent out. And if anybody on the council has any questions, I'd like to answer it. But I also realize it's July and you on leave.
Thank you, Bill. Councilor Youngblood.
Bill, the legislature approved Governor Malloy making changes to the budget, I guess, right, with unilateral changes, or at his discretion. That's right? I'm reading that right?
I will continue with your question, and then I'll answer.
Well, what's the time frame for this? I mean, I know you mentioned possibly, I mean, the municipal aid was protected. There's a possibility that there's some other options that could come down as options to solve the budget issue, the budget gap. Oh, I'm sorry, the revenue shortage in next year's budget, the next two years' budget. What's the time frame? When will we find out?
The bill that we passed last Thursday night, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, basically says that sometime in July, Governor Malloy must release his Plan B, how he's going to come up with the $700 million shortfall. By September 1st, CBAC, the State Union Coalition, must respond with any negotiations must be completed by that date. There were the way the legislation is written was that it may come back to the General Assembly for approval. I had an amendment that's I brought out on the floor of the House, just changing the word from may to shall be brought back to the legislation for approval, and it was defeated on a party line vote. So the Majority Leader, Brendan Sharkey, who I am personally friendly with because we've worked together for the last 4 years on planning and development, has said to me that, Bill, I know we defeated your amendment, but we will bring it back. And I have to trust that he will, if there's major changes in it, bring it back. But you are talking a lot of money difference right now for it. The other problem that we're running into right away is the original CBAC agreement, for instance, called for a wage freeze as of July 1st. No agreement, those wages are increases are in place. Does two things. One, it starts to it reduces the savings by not having a wage increase. The other thing is if there's a new agreement signed, all of a sudden people are going to see their paychecks go down. It's one thing not to see your paycheck go up. It's a whole different psychological thing to see your paycheck go down. So I'm not part of the union negotiations. Unfortunately, the way they were handled between the union and the governor was that the only information I or just about anybody else in the General Assembly had is what they read in the newspapers. It was very, very tightly controlled.
Yeah, I mean, it's important that I'm sure you know that the complaints are already coming in about the sales tax on things like basic clothing. Small amounts of basic necessities for clothing, and people have to pay tax on that now, where before those things were exempted. So it's already having an impact on people's everyday lives. And so even though it's going to be having an effect potentially on a number of state employees, it's having a large effect on all the residents of the state of Connecticut right now. And so I think the concept that everybody is sharing the burden here is true, and they're starting to feel it. And I think that we on the town level are fielding the same kind of complaints about taxes, about the sewer fees, et cetera, that you folks are feeling and hearing about at the state level. And we're all hoping that it'll be getting better sometime soon. But we're also digging in at this point. I think you are too.
Now, my email is steadily filling up with people going, what are you doing? I just did this or that. And I know my daughter bought a car on the 29th of June and had to wait in line because people were saying who were going to buy in July anyhow, why should I pay the increase in sales tax?
Right.
And I am sure our package stores are going to be losing a lot more business to mainly Massachusetts as the alcohol tax went up. The doubling of the corporate surcharge, I don't know how much that's going to impact the major companies that pay it, but I'm sure their accountants are trying to figure out how to divert more income from other states other than Connecticut.
Thank you.
And I'll leave these here, and anybody can pick them up.
Have a question? Okay. Bill, you're our state representative. Did you vote for any of these tax increases?
The tax increases, no.
Any increases?
I don't want to say no, because there could have been fee increases in some of the other legislation, but in the major budget, no, I did not support it at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.